Hi, welcome everyone. This is Oleg Sosievsky. In this module, we are going to discuss entrepreneurial thinking, why entrepreneurial thinking is important in any context, and also we are going to discuss some myths or misconceptions about entrepreneurship. I would like to start with the following article from the Boston Globe in January 2015. The title of the article was the following: Russian science is amazing. So why hasn't it taken over the world? And indeed, for example, if you take a look at the physics scientists who got Nobel Prize in physics for invention of laser technologies, you will see there are two Soviet scientists or Russian scientists and one American scientist. So how did it happen that even though the initial ideas of lasers were developed back in Soviet Union, we don't see any major laser technology, laser products emerging from Russia today? Why doesn't Russia dominate the laser market? The same thing with extracting oil from unconventional oil wells, for example, SAGD or oil fracking processes. The interesting thing that the initial ideas about how to get oil from depleted oil wells, old oil wells or unconventional oil wells, they were developed in Soviet Union back in 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. The Soviet scientists wrote some articles about those technologies in obscure academic journals, and that's it. Right now, the revival of SAGD, of fracking, came from Texas, for example, and at this stage, specialist engineers from Texas or from Canada would go back to Russia in order to help Russians to extract oil in Siberian oil wells. How does it happen that even though the initial invention was done in Russia or in Soviet Union, Russians don't dominate this technology worldwide? Finally, another example, computing technologies. Back until 1970s, mid-1970s and even late 1970s, Russian or Soviet science had major breakthrough, major innovative ideas about development of computers. For example, that particular computer that is made, that is put on this slide, that computer was using the logic with the basis of 3. So each digit, unlike what could occupy not two states as our traditional digital computers right now, 0 and 1. That particular computer operated the logic having each digit could be -1, 0, and 1, which made a lot of operations like subtraction and division much faster. So how did it happen that all these great inventions happened in Soviet Union or happened in Russia, but they never saw the light of the day? And of course, there are lots of different answers to this question. Somebody can say the institutions are not like that. Somebody can say that it is all about the resources or resource-based economy of Russia rather than innovation-based. But at the end of the day, the core issue here is the difference between an invention and an innovation. Invention is all about getting some new knowledge, like a discovery. Discovery is understanding something about our world. Invention is getting some new idea about how something can be done. Innovation is putting invention to commercial use. Innovation is all about making sure that this new idea is accepted by stakeholders, by the market, by the government, by the public. So there is a huge difference between invention and innovation, and this difference is at the core of entrepreneurial thinking. Entrepreneurial thinking is much less about creativity and generating like really cool, totally novel ideas. Entrepreneurial thinking is much more about finding real-world problems that can be solved using novel solutions. Any idea, any great technology will see the light of the day, will be implemented, if and only if it becomes an innovation, if and only if somebody finds a viable business model around this invention, which will allow to put this invention to commercial use. So, Russian science is amazing. They are really great at, or at least they used to be great at discoveries and inventions, but moving to innovation requires entrepreneurial thinking, and this is what our course is all about. It is not about how to, or not only about how to start a startup, how to build multi-billion company. It is also about how to notice real-world problems, how to notice novel innovative solutions to those problems, and how to link all of this together in viable business models. Let me talk a little bit more about why entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking is so needed. This particular statistics comes from a well-known entrepreneurship scholar, William Baumol. And in this table you can see that we compare, we actually take a look at how much economies in the United States, France, Japan, Sweden, UK, Italy and Germany have been growing in the last century. And we can see that, for example, in the United States, the economy grew almost 7 times. This is GDP per capita. Of course, a lot of people have proper critique of GDP per capita as a measure of national wealth. But at the end of the day, GDP per capita shows how much resources the society has in order to solve all the problems like healthcare, education, and so on, whatever we want. If GDP per capita raises 7 times, as in the United States, people become much richer, even though inequality is rising and there are lots of other things, but ultimately GDP per capita shows how much resources a society has. We see that in the United States it increased 7 times over the last century. In Japan it increased 17 times, in Italy 10 or 11 times, and so on. And what is particularly important? This is the statement of William Baumol that I referred to. He said, look, all those things that economists care about, like breaking market power of monopolists, making sure that perfect information flows through the markets, and so on, all those things account for really minor percentage of total increase in societal wealth. Most of the wealth is created by entrepreneurs who push the productivity frontier of economics. The entrepreneurs who notice new problems that can be solved, or all problems that can be solved using new methods, new technologies. And it is the entrepreneurs who move our societies further. Now another interesting chart. This chart GDP per capita, but not for the prior century, but going back to 1500s. Also, the chart is taken from the book by William Baumol, The Microtheory of Innovative Entrepreneurship. So we can pretty much see that up until 1800s, the GDP per capita of United Kingdom, Italy and China were pretty much the same, like really small. All people lived in poverty except for a really small percentage of elite, like nobles and so on. Then something happened. Starting from 1800s, 1850s, the GDP per capita in United Kingdom started rising. Italy followed with a lag of 50 years. China is catching up only right now. So what is this? Typical answer about what has happened somewhere here from 1800 to 1850s is the Industrial Revolution, is a steam engine that allowed more efficient factories that led essentially to Industrial Revolution. But this is only part of the story. The other major part of the story is that Industrial Revolution was fueled not only by the new technologies or scientific methods, scientific approach, experimental approach for production, scientific discoveries. Around the same time, entrepreneurial spirit in United Kingdom was unleashed. People were allowed to form limited liability companies and later public companies. This allowed entrepreneurs to take the best technologies and put them to commercial use. a lot of scholars show that actually industrial revolution and the raise in standards of living, first in the United Kingdom and then in the rest of the countries, was stimulated not only by new technologies and not so much by new technologies, but rather by new approaches for organizing the economy, by allowing people to become entrepreneurs to solve societal problems, and by this means to build some wealth for themselves. A good example or a good justification for this is the same steam engine. So the first ideas of steam engine, the first actually working steam engines, were already documented in ancient Rome, where the steam engines were used for opening the doors of the temples. It looked really cool, like a miracle, the doors are opening themselves. So how did it happen that real industrial revolution with improvement of standards of living happened only in 1800s rather than in ancient Rome? Well, the answer is that in ancient Rome, people thought that making money is not a good thing. It is actually a bad thing. Instead, you have to do philosophy and look at those temple doors opening and closing. While in the United Kingdom, the entrepreneurs were allowed to become wealthy and simultaneously to build wealth for the whole society. The same story is true for China. China is a great nation in terms of inventions. Gunpowder and lots of other things were invented in China way before they were reinvented or imported to Europe. But we see the raise in standards of living in China only once they allowed the really entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial thinking to drive the wealth up. So, the point I'm trying to make is the following. Of course we need inventions, of course we need discoveries, but all these great things will see the light of the day. All these great things will improve somebody's standard of living if and only if they become innovations that are roped in viable business models that allow us to operate, that allows us to solve some societal problems. And that's why business model is so important, and we will be talking about them, business models, in the next modules a lot. Now, another issue. Why we do not see so much innovation, even though we are sure that innovation or entrepreneurial thinking is so important. And this is where I have to talk about innovator's dilemma, or the real innovator's dilemma. Here is the thing. Any business, any firm, any manager can and usually should maintain doing business as usual. Business as usual means let's continue doing what brought us success in the first place. So oil and gas companies in Alberta keep on getting oil from under the ground, no matter what the price of oil is, simply because this is their business as usual. This is what made them great in the first place. This is what made CEO a CEO in the first place. The easiest way to destroy your career is to move from business as usual department towards some innovative spin-off unit that is destined to disrupt everything else. If you want to become a CEO of a large established company, usually you have to grow in the ranks of traditional functional structure doing business as usual. On the other hand, a company or a manager can engage in entrepreneurial actions. The entrepreneurial actions is all about trying crazy new things in order to see maybe it will work. Unfortunately, entrepreneurial actions have huge variability in outcomes. Their results are highly unreliable. Business as usual leads to moderate but reliable outcomes. Entrepreneurial actions, radical new products, getting to totally different countries, using radically new processes, all of these things are entrepreneurial actions, are essence of strategic entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurial thinking, the problem is that they lead to highly unreliable outcomes, and the chances to go out of business if you are doing entrepreneurship is way higher than the chances of going out of business if you are doing business as usual. So, for example, the companies that are doing entrepreneurial things, this is their distribution of outcomes. Everyone who gets to the left-hand side of the distribution, which is very, very high, which is very, very fat, in case of entrepreneurial actions, this left-hand side, all of these companies are failing. On the other hand, of those guys who were doing business as usual, only a small percentage are failing. So entrepreneurship, if you don't use proper safeguards that we are going to discuss a lot in the modules, if you're not using proper entrepreneurial thinking tools to manage risks and to make sure that you are failing early, failing fast, and not getting here, somewhere here, to the really, really left-hand side of performance distribution. So entrepreneurial actions on average do not work. Of course, one can say that all the Snapchats, Airbnbs, Ubers, Facebooks of the world, they started with somebody doing something radical. They started with somebody dropping out of college. So if you keep on working on your college degree, you're doing business as usual, which leads to reliable but not great outcomes, but reliable outcomes. And this is the proper thing to do. There are good things why businesses are doing business as usual, why managers are doing business as usual, because this is what they have to do. It is a crazy idea to drop out of college in order to start something new. Of course, again, all these great companies started with somebody doing something radical. And of course, a lot of known founders, they dropped out of college in order to continue their startup. But we have to understand that this is survivorship bias. We see only those companies that did survive and become great. For every Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, there will be thousands and thousands of other potential entrepreneurs who drop out of college in order to start something and never finish it, or never reach success. We simply don't see all of them. So, the real innovator's dilemma is the following. On the one hand, business as usual is safe. On the other hand, while entrepreneurial actions are unreliable, are unsafe. However, with time, business as usual stops working. In the long term, only entrepreneurial actions ensure growth and prosperity. That's why entrepreneurial thinking, it has to be part of core curriculum of any MBA program. Business as usual, increasing operational efficiency, doing great things in finance, all of them are very, very important for the short term. In the long run, business as usual will be disrupted by new technologies, by new business models, by something happening, rise of protectionism or nationalism, by coronavirus, and so on. Coronavirus basically shows us that we are unprepared for entrepreneurial actions if business as usual doesn't work. So the real innovator's dilemma is that business as usual in the long term, even in medium term, will not work anymore, but entrepreneurial actions lead to highly unreliable outcomes, and usually we don't know what to do about them, how to approach entrepreneurial thinking in such a way that it is reliable, in such a way that we don't risk the destiny of our business. That's why entrepreneurial thinking is so important. Entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial management is usual. So entrepreneurial management is all about making sure that all your company, all employees in your company are constantly noticing the opportunities to solve real-world problems. So entrepreneurship cannot come from the C-suite only. Entrepreneurial thinking is the duty of any employee of your organization, particularly those employees that are working with end customers. So we start with noticing opportunities, we generate creative solutions, and there are ways to do it. Entrepreneurial thinking is also about finding interesting ways to solve real-world problems. Then we prepare business cases, which is basically preparing a business model, preparing financial projections, which we later validate and see whether they work or not. If they don't work, we get back to the drawing board until we actually, the validation proves that some opportunity is worth executing. So, Entrepreneurial management is all about, it is about approach to organizational strategy. It is all about solving real-world problems at the center of any strategy. We start with problems, we generate creative solutions, we prepare business cases, we develop business models for them, we validate, and then we get in the circle up until we execute something. If I need to put the whole entrepreneurial management in one slide, here it is. However, entrepreneurship has a bunch of myths, particularly this entrepreneurial thinking. There are a lot of misconceptions around it that I need to discuss at the beginning. Myth number 1. You need high potential business idea. Before starting anything major, you really need to get a perfect business idea that would work. Actually, this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people don't do any entrepreneurship, simply because they are waiting for this great idea. In truth, the truth is, there are implemented entrepreneurial ideas and unimplemented. You learn by doing, you validate your idea by trying to implement it, and you improve along the way. So if you are trying to conceive your idea to make it perfect before you do anything about it, in most cases this idea will never see the light of the day. Let's take a look at Google. I deliberately put Google here. So, as you probably know, Google started by 2 graduates. That's important actually, not dropouts, but graduates of Stanford, whose idea was to improve the search technologies, search in the web. In pre-Google times, most of the search engines like Lucas, AltaVista, and so on, they basically did search using the keywords. And smart webmasters would insert a lot of keywords into their website that would drive a lot of traffic to their website, allowing them to monetize through showing banner ads, but customers were unhappy because they were getting irrelevant search results. Google decided, the Google founders decided to try something different. They said, why don't we rank websites in search results on the basis of how many other websites are referring to a particular website? So if everyone else is referring to this particular website, probably this website is important and is interesting. On the other hand, if another website has lots of relevant keywords, but nobody refers to that website, maybe something is wrong about it. So they tried this technology. This technology has been actually used, or this approach has been used in science for a long time in order to see which branches of science or which articles are more influential than others. Google decided, or Google founders decided, to try the same idea for searching in internet. And so idea was great. It was technologically implemented, but it was an invention. They needed to move from invention to innovation. They needed to develop a business model around it. They needed to find a way to monetize their idea in order to raise money, in order to implement it, in order actually to solve real-world problem. So their first idea was, let's license out this technology. Maybe Yahoo, maybe some corporations in Silicon Valley will be interested in using our technology. Well, the only problem, this didn't work. So at that time, Google was already getting hundreds of millions in evaluations, and trying to license this technology to other technology companies simply didn't work out. It was really hard market to work in. It was market limited in terms of size, and in general, this whole thing was not able to monetize Google's idea. Then Google did the second iteration. They tried to put advertisements, ranked advertisements, in the search results. And this was a success. So it is only their second iteration of the business model around the same technology that allowed Google to become what Google is today. So my point is the following. Of course you need a promising idea, but in order to fully understand the potential of this idea, in order to adjust it to market realities, you have to go and give it a try. Never just keep idea in your head. Go and validate it. There are different ways of validating the ideas, and this validation is essential part of entrepreneurial thinking. By the way, if we talk about Google's bread and butter is still ranked advertisements. Most of the money is still generated not by other services of Google, but still by showing ads in the search results. And the interesting thing that Google did not invent this way of monetizing the search technology. There was another company called Overture that later was acquired by Yahoo, who had even patent for the original idea of putting ads in the search results. So there was a major court battle between Google and Yahoo once Yahoo acquired that patent, and ultimately Google had to pay 2.7 million of their shares in order to settle this, in order to get perpetual license for the patent. So again, don't wait for the idea to fully emerge in your head. Start testing it. There are ways to test ideas early on and to put aside, select out those ideas that don't work early on. A misconception number 2. You need a comprehensive business plan. This is the second most frequent reason why a lot of entrepreneurial ideas never see the light of the day, because their founder is working for half a year to develop this type of a book business plan, and they think this is a major step that is needed to start off the business. Well, here's the thing. In most cases, business planning itself is very important, but business plans are not. One day I actually decided to test whether business planning has any noticeable impact on important, meaningful performance characteristics of the company. So in 2016, together with a team of co-authors, we published a paper called Business Sense or Subjective Satisfaction, the effect of or outcomes of business planning comprehensiveness in the SME context, in small and medium enterprise context. So basically we tried to see, looking at hundreds and hundreds of companies, is there any statistical pattern that would show the association between comprehensiveness of business planning, so how much planning you do, budgeting, strategic planning, marketing planning, financial planning, is this associated in any way with important outcomes, such as operational performance, financial performance, subjective performance. And this is what we found. Business planning comprehensiveness was indeed driving operational performance. Things like employee productivity, like sales per employee, marketing sales alignment, so how much your leads are translated to actual sales, for example, and generating enough prospective buyers, all of these things were associated with higher business planning comprehensiveness. Simultaneously, what's important, business planning comprehensiveness improved subjective performance or subjective assessment of performance of business. Things like feeling in control of the business. So owners of companies that were doing more planning, these owners had felt that they are controlling their business and felt happy about their business. Even they took more vacation days per year. So if you have all those plans, you feel in control, you feel happy about your business, and you can even relax a lot more. The problem is that ultimately business planning comprehensiveness didn't affect what really matters. It didn't affect profit and revenue growth. The companies that were doing a lot of planning were growing and were as profitable as companies that didn't have those planning. This gets me to the idea of competing development approaches. There are some old approach to entrepreneurial thinking is all about writing business plans. A lot of new approaches to entrepreneurial thinking is all about throw out those business plans, go and talk to your customers, develop your minimal viable product, interview 100 customers, pivot as you move along, and get minimal viable product. Make sure that somebody pays for your product. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Of course, you have to do planning in advance. This is your homework. If you select the wrong industry, your startup or your entrepreneurial idea will not see the light of the day. If something is not technologically feasible, it will not see the light of the day. But on the other hand, you should not spend years writing comprehensive plans. Instead, you have to develop minimal plans for your business. For example, business model canvas or short ideas about your business model and then financial projections. And after that, get your prototype and go and talk to customers. See whether somebody wants to pay for what you developed. You need planning and you need to learn by doing. These are two competing development approaches that are at the core of entrepreneurial thinking. You have to do your homework in advance, but also you have to understand that market is the only authority and no amount of planning can compensate for lack of understanding your market. So, well, of course, in some cases you do need to write plans. For example, if your bank wants your plan. But ultimately, if you ever talked to a banker about supporting your entrepreneurial idea, they usually need a plan, but simultaneously they need a lot of collateral in order to prove that they will get their money anyway. I saw a lot of successful companies that proceeded without writing formal business plans. They did engage in planning because this is their homework, that they tested it, but writing plans is not always necessary. Misconception number 3. In order to start business, I need lots of investment. This is simply not true. Absolute majority of companies, 99% of companies, start with a good idea that gets validated and with minimal amount of money. Only in rare cases do you need a lot of money. So, I don't know, if you are trying to build a nuclear reactor or a new pipeline, yes, you will need billions of dollars in order to start. But most other companies can be successfully started and should be successfully started with minimal investments. That's why we need things like lean startup and hypothesis testing. It is all about fail fast, fail quick, and pivot if you see that your business model does not work. In order to validate your idea, in most cases you don't need any money at all. And only once you see that idea gets more and more promising do you need to start raising money. Furthermore, as entrepreneurship professor and entrepreneurship practitioner, I meet a lot of people who say, well, I have this great idea, but nobody wants to give me the money in order to implement it. Life is unfair. Well, this is not true. In most cases, if nobody wants to invest into your idea, there is something wrong with an idea. And you really have to listen to those rejections in order to try to understand what's going on wrong there. Investors are not here to make you feel miserable. Investors, angel investors, venture capitalists, and other types of investors that we will discuss in next modules, all these investors are here to make money. And if they see a promising idea, they will line up in order to support you. If they don't support you, in most cases there is something wrong with your idea. Then, affordable loss principle and effectuation, what it is all about. So it is all about, affordable loss principle means take affordable losses. Treat every project, every entrepreneurial project in your startup or in your established company that tries to implement entrepreneurial thinking, treat it as an experiment that can fail. And this is natural that most of these experiments will fail. Affordable loss principles means make sure that you don't bet the financial stability, the financial future of your family or of your company on a single project. Test hypotheses, validate your business model using minimal investments. This is possible. Effectuation, something that deserves separate discussion later on. Effectuation is all about start with what you have. Don't start with what you want to achieve, like I want to build a nuclear plant in somewhere in Western Canada. Start with whom you know, who knows you, what is your reputation, which kind of partnerships do you have that you can leverage. Start with what you have and then get to aspired goals. Finally, raising capital is quite easy if you have a promising idea. I cannot stress this enough. Myth number 4. Hockey stick growth. If you look at financial projections of most aspiring entrepreneurs, you would see a hockey stick here. it would be something like that. We will grow slowly initially, and then we will achieve linear or exponential growth very, very fast. In practice, most of the startups still have hockey stick but inverted one. They are growing up until they hit some ceiling, up until they saturate their market, or they fully use their operational facilities, or they use their capital, all the capital that they had, and they cannot grow further. So most startups grow up until some level, then hit a bottleneck that they cannot overcome. Successful startups grow like this. This is where the founders or the board helps the founders to understand the bottleneck that constrains their development in each particular period of time. So, for example, at the very, very beginning, we don't have our product on the product developed yet. Our bottleneck is R&D, and we cannot grow without it. Once we remove this bottleneck, we get the product out, we hit the next bottleneck. For example, we can manufacture only so many of the things. And we cannot grow until we remove the bottleneck in terms of manufacturing. Once we remove manufacturing bottleneck, we will hit the next bottleneck sooner or later. This next bottleneck might be, for example, we saturated our market, and now we have to go abroad. Once we go abroad, we hit the next bottleneck. Maybe our product becomes obsolete. So, we never see hockey stick growth. The successful growth is like this. Successful growth is growth from bottleneck to bottleneck. Successful founding firms, founding teams are those teams that are cognizant of their bottlenecks in each period of time and are working towards removing this bottleneck. Myth number 5. Most startups die, or most new ventures die. It's a crazy idea to do anything entrepreneurial, either internal corporate venture or just to start your startup. And the data that I'm showing on this slide actually comes from my own calculation from something called Kaufman Firm Survey. It is a representative sample of all United States startups that were founded in 2004, and they are tracked to 2011. There is like 4,000 companies, over 4,000 companies that are tracked over 7 years, trying to understand particularly how many of them die out, and they represent the full economy. So my calculations show that by the year of 2011, 7-year survival rate is just 43%. So more than half of all the companies that were founded in the United States in 2004 did not exist anymore in 2011. And this is kind of sad. This probably suggests that it is high risk. So the statistics is there, but it has to be interpreted properly. Not every exit is a failure. A lot of those companies were acquired with a premium. So you develop some technology, then somebody else comes and pays you 10 times more than you invested in your technology and gives even you a position in their company and huge salary for the next few years. Is it a failure? No, it is definitely an exit. It is reflected in my statistics of sad survivorship statistics, but it is not a bad thing. Some ventures died out because their founders simply joined another companies. For example, a bunch of software developers start a company, get their product, see that it is not going that well, and then they join Google because of the experience that they gained in their own company, and they successfully close their company. There is nothing wrong about it. So, of course, we have to acknowledge, most companies die out. Even in 7 years, more than half of them will die out. But it is okay. If you are doing it right, the risks associated with entrepreneurship are not higher than the risk associated with regular corporate activity or regular corporate jobs. If you use affordable loss principle in order to make sure that you don't bet too much on each individual product, if you fail fast and fail quickly, if you pivot quickly once you see that your original business model does not work, the chances of success are really high. If you are obsessed with a problem that your customers have rather than with your solution or your technology, if you are obsessed with growth rather than with getting a lot of money today, the chances of successful entrepreneurial thinking and successful entrepreneurial projects are very high. And this is what entrepreneurial thinking and our subsequent modules are all about. So don't be discouraged by sad statistics of new venture survivorship. It is there, but it has to be interpreted properly. Which gets me to the point that I would like to stress again. Venture closure is not the same as failure. Some ventures are acquired with premium, some ventures are closed because founders find better opportunities in corporate world, and there is nothing wrong with venture failures if you're doing it right. Thank you.